The night was supposed to be quiet. Snowflakes drifted against the window of a cramped Chicago apartment, and the city outside hummed with distant traffic. Inside, Ava Sterling, 6 months pregnant, clutched her belly as a sharp wave of pain tightened her body. She had been feeling weak all week, but her husband Daniel hadn't cared enough to notice. He was too busy entertaining someone else. The door burst open with a slam. Ava's heart skipped. Daniel stumbled in, his cologne sharp, his smile cruel. Behind him, Zara, the woman Ava had long suspected but never dared confront, sauntered in wearing a fur coat and smug eyes. "Why is she still here?" Zara sneered, her red lips curling. "Didn't you promise me she'd be gone by now?" Ava's chest tightened. Her unborn baby shifted as if sensing danger. "Daniel," she whispered, "what is she doing in our home?" Daniel's laugh was bitter. "Our home? Don't make me laugh. You've been nothing but dead weight. You can't even bring money to this marriage." "Zara understands me. You? You're just a burden." The words sliced deeper than any knife. Ava wanted to scream, but her voice cracked. "I'm carrying your child." Zara rolled her eyes, stepping closer with a glint of malice. "And that child is the very reason you'll never have a future with him. He doesn't need a sick, useless wife dragging him down." Daniel poured himself a drink, eyes glazed with arrogance. "She's right, Ava. You're weak. You'll never fit into the life I want. And tonight?" His tone turned chilling. "Tonight we're ending this." Before Ava could understand, Zara grabbed the kettle from the stove. Steam hissed violently. The metallic scream of boiling water filled the air. Ava's heart pounded, realizing what was about to happen. "Daniel, please," she begged, stumbling back against the couch. "I'm pregnant. You can't." But Daniel didn't move to stop Zara. His silence was worse than violence. It was consent. Zara's laugh was cruel as she lifted the kettle higher. "Let's see how long you last when the world sees the scars. You'll never show your face again. He'll never want you." Ava tried to run, but her swollen belly slowed her down. The kettle tilted. A scalding stream of water, bubbling at 100 degrees, splashed across her arm and shoulder. Pain tore through her like fire. She screamed so loudly the neighbors below turned their heads toward the ceiling, wondering if it was just a fight or something worse. The burning sensation was unbearable, searing her skin. She crumpled to the floor, clutching her belly with trembling hands. The baby kicked violently inside her, a reminder of what she had to protect. Zara leaned down, whispering so close that Ava could smell her perfume. "You don't belong here. When you're gone, no one will even remember your name." Daniel stood over her, glass in hand, expression flat. Not once did he bend to help. Not once did he show mercy. Tears blurred Ava's eyes, mixing with the agony tearing across her body. She wanted to scream his name, to remind him of their vows, of the nights they once whispered dreams into each other's ears. But those memories felt like lies now. She collapsed against the cold floor, her mind foggy. The pain was too much. The betrayal even worse. She heard Zara's mocking laugh fade into the distance as they left the apartment, leaving her to die in silence. The ceiling above swirled in her fading vision. Her body convulsed with sobs as the thought repeated in her mind. "They wanted me gone." Darkness closed in, heavy and merciless. The last thing she felt was her baby's desperate kick. Then everything went still. The apartment became silent, except for the drip of water still spilling from the kettle. Snow fell harder outside, covering the streets in white, as if the world itself wanted to bury what had just happened. But fate had other plans. Because Ava Sterling was not just a poor, forgotten wife. She was something Daniel and Zara had never imagined. Her blood carried the legacy of an empire, a dynasty worth billions. And the moment she opened her eyes again, their world would begin to crumble. And in that silence, a shadow moved at the doorway. Someone who had been watching, someone who would not let her die tonight. Long before boiling water scalded her skin and betrayal nearly shattered her spirit, Ava Sterling was just a quiet young woman trying to live a simple life. To outsiders, she looked ordinary, perhaps even forgettable, but behind her soft eyes and modest smile was a truth that could shake entire boardrooms. Ava was the sole heir to a billion-dollar fortune. And no one, not even her husband Daniel, had ever known. Ava was born in New York, the only daughter of Margaret and William Mackenzie. The Mackenzies were legends in the world of finance, their empire stretching across real estate, technology, and international trade. But wealth never brought Ava happiness. Her parents' marriage was cold, her father's hunger for power relentless, and her mother's heart worn down by years of loneliness. When Ava was 10, her parents separated. Her mother whisked her away to Chicago, determined to raise her daughter away from flashing cameras and ruthless investors. Margaret's wish was simple, that Ava could live as a normal girl. No drivers, no lavish parties, no headlines in glossy magazines. Just school, books, and a chance to feel human. And so Ava grew up far removed from her inheritance. Tucked inside a modest apartment above a bookstore, she stacked shelves, swept floors, and learned to find peace in pages rather than palaces. When Margaret passed away 3 years ago, Ava's world collapsed. She had lost the only anchor she had. The will revealed what she had always suspected, but never spoken aloud. She was the rightful heiress to the Mackenzie empire. But Ava wasn't ready to claim it. With grief heavy in her chest, she decided to keep living quietly, honoring her mother's wish for a normal life. She swore to herself she wouldn't reveal her inheritance until she found someone who loved her for who she truly was. That was when Daniel entered her life. Daniel Sterling was charming, confident, and carried himself like a man on the rise. Ava met him at a car dealership when she was looking for a simple used vehicle. He had a smile that could melt ice, a voice smooth as velvet, and an energy that made her feel, for the first time, seen. When he flirted, she blushed. When he offered her coffee after closing the deal, she said yes. Within 6 months, they were married at City Hall, their vows exchanged with laughter and promises of forever. For a while, Ava believed she had found the life her mother dreamed for her. Simple, sweet, ordinary. She worked part-time at the bookstore. Daniel chased his career in corporate sales, and together they planned for a family. When Ava discovered she was pregnant, she cried tears of joy. Daniel seemed over the moon as well, promising he'd be the best father, vowing to climb the ladder to give their baby everything they deserved. But cracks soon began to show. Daniel's ambition grew sharp, edged with cruelty. He started making sly remarks about Ava not earning enough. He demanded she take extra shifts despite her morning sickness. He bought himself new suits, fancy watches, expensive dinners under the excuse of client relations, while criticizing Ava for buying prenatal vitamins or an occasional pastry at the cafe. Still, Ava stayed quiet. She had been taught patience, forgiveness. She told herself he was just stressed, that fatherhood weighed on him. She believed, against her instincts, that he still loved her. But love doesn't make a man come home reeking of another woman's perfume. Love doesn't make him laugh at private texts, hiding his phone the moment she entered the room. And love certainly doesn't make him parade a mistress into their home and watch silently as boiling water is poured on the mother of his child. Ava's silence had cost her dearly, yet even in her darkest hours, she carried something Daniel could never touch. Resilience. Because Ava wasn't just a poor, abandoned wife. The quiet bookstore girl carried the bloodline of billionaires. Locked away in her late mother's safe deposit box was proof of her inheritance. Documents of ownership, shares, and control of companies Daniel couldn't even dream of running. Ava had chosen to hide this power, but now, with her baby's future at stake and her body scarred by betrayal, she knew the time for silence was over. Still, the road ahead would not be easy. Ava was pregnant, weak, and broken. She lay in a hospital bed that night, pain shooting across her body, tears drying on her cheeks. Her mind echoed with her mother's last words. One day, Ava, you'll understand that strength isn't about wealth. It's about what you do when the world tries to break you. And as she drifted in and out of consciousness, she realized the truth. She could no longer pretend to be powerless. She would rise, not just for herself, but for the child inside her. But rising meant facing Daniel again. And Daniel was not the kind of man who gave up control easily. Ava knew if he discovered her secret now, he'd cling harder, manipulate deeper, and maybe even try to finish what he and Zara had started. She needed an ally, someone who knew her true identity, someone powerful enough to shield her until she was strong enough to stand alone. And that someone was already watching from the shadows, waiting for the right moment to step in. Because while Ava believed she was alone, a man had sworn to her late mother that he would protect her no matter the cost. And the moment he revealed himself, Daniel and Zara's lives would never be the same. Chicago was a city of two faces. On one side, steel towers pierced the winter sky, their glass walls glowing with the wealth of who lived and schemed inside. Luxury cars slid across icy streets, their owners sipping champagne in penthouses that reached into the clouds. On the other side, shadows crept across narrow alleyways, where old apartments stood like weary soldiers. Bricks crumbling, heat barely working, and neighbors struggled to stretch every paycheck. Ava Sterling lived in the second world, though by blood she belonged to the first. Her one-bedroom apartment sat on the fourth floor of a crumbling brick building. The walls were thin enough that she could hear the arguments of the couple next door and the crying of a baby down the hall. The heater rattled all night, doing little to push away the biting chill of January. The floors sagged, the paint peeled, and every month she wondered if the landlord would raise the rent again. This was where Ava came home every evening after her shifts at the bookstore. She would press her swollen belly gently, whispering promises to her unborn child. "We'll get through this. I'll protect you." She decorated the corner of the bedroom with a second-hand crib she found at a thrift store. She sewed tiny blankets with her own hands, trying to create warmth in a place that had none. But Daniel despised this life. To him, the apartment wasn't a home, it was a cage. He craved the glitter of the other Chicago, the one of cocktail parties, fast cars, and hotel bars filled with powerful men. He would storm into their apartment, slamming his briefcase down, snarling about the rent, about bills, about how Ava wasn't doing enough. Then the next night he would disappear, dressed in expensive suits he could barely afford, reeking of whiskey and perfume when he returned at dawn. Zara belonged to that glittering side of the city too. Unlike Ava, who moved quietly, Zara thrived on attention. She flaunted her curves, her designer dresses, her lipstick smiles. She laughed too loudly at Daniel's jokes, parading herself like a prize he had earned. She wasn't satisfied with being a mistress. She wanted the crown, and the only way to have it was to strip it from Ava, even if Ava was pregnant. The contrast between worlds was painful. One evening, Daniel dragged Ava with him to a corporate dinner. She wore her plain black dress, the same one she had worn to her mother's funeral. She had tried to smooth her hair, put on light makeup, but the moment they stepped into the Grand Hotel ballroom, she felt like a shadow. Crystal chandeliers bathed the room in golden light. The air buzzed with laughter, champagne glasses clinking, and the smell of dishes that cost more than Ava's weekly grocery budget. Daniel didn't stay by her side. He abandoned her near the door, striding into the crowd as if he owned it. He kissed cheeks, shook hands, and pulled Zara close to his side, ignoring the shock of the guests who whispered behind their napkins. Ava stood alone, clutching her clutch bag tightly, her stomach heavy with life inside her. She overheard the whispers. "Isn't that his wife? Why does he have the other woman here? She looks so plain. No wonder he strayed. She's pregnant, poor thing. What a humiliation." Each word stung. Ava wanted to vanish into the floor, but she stayed because Daniel had ordered her to. He had hissed before they entered, "Stand there, smile, and don't embarrass me." That night she returned to the cold apartment alone, Daniel leaving with Zara in his car. Ava collapsed on the couch, tears soaking into her hands. She could not understand how love had twisted into this cruelty. But if Daniel had seen the world Ava truly belonged to, he would have choked on his arrogance. Because downtown, at the top of a glass tower, the boardroom of Kenzie Holdings stretched across half a floor. Leather chairs surrounded a mahogany table, polished so perfectly it reflected the city lights. This was Ava's inheritance. Her name was etched into documents locked inside steel vaults. Every glowing skyscraper in the distance whispered her family's legacy. She could command armies of lawyers, mobilize billions in assets, crush competitors with a single phone call. Yet she lived in silence. A prisoner of love she thought was real. The irony was cruel. The billionaire heiress slept on a sagging mattress while her husband poured money into hotel rooms for his mistress. The rightful queen lived in shadows while pretenders drank in golden halls. And still, Ava remained hidden. For her baby. For her mother's dream of a normal life. For the hope that Daniel's love could be saved. But now, lying in a hospital bed after boiling water seared her skin, Ava saw the city differently. The glittering towers were not distant dreams anymore. They were weapons. weapons that could destroy Daniel and Zara the way they had tried to destroy her. Yet, she couldn't wield them alone. She needed help. And somewhere in that glittering world, a man was watching. A man powerful enough to stand between her and the enemies who wanted her gone. He had waited for this moment, keeping his promise to Margaret Mackenzie. And soon, Ava would discover that her mother's old friend, the reclusive billionaire Ethan Blackwell, was already moving the pieces of revenge into place. If Ava Sterling's life was a quiet storm of sacrifice and silence, Daniel Sterling's was a blaze of ambition gone rotten. He wasn't born into wealth, but he carried himself as if he had been cheated out of it. For Daniel, the world was divided into winners and losers, and he refused to be a loser, no matter the cost. At 32, Daniel had mastered the art of deception. At the car dealership where Ava first met him, he was charming, attentive, a man who looked like he was hungry for success. But beneath the polished suits and rehearsed smiles, there was rot. Daniel didn't just want success. He wanted shortcuts, power without patience, luxury without labor. And when he realized that Ava could not give him those things, he turned to someone else. Zara Flynn was 25, bold, and unapologetically ruthless. She worked as a marketing assistant at a firm Daniel often collaborated with. She wasn't the most talented employee, but she had something else, a talent for manipulation. She knew how to tilt her head, how to laugh at the right moments, how to make a man feel like he was the center of the universe. The first time Daniel took her out to dinner, it wasn't business. It was a test. And when Zara leaned across the table, touched his hand, and whispered that he deserved more than a plain little wife from a bookstore, Daniel was hooked. From then on, Zara wasn't just a mistress. She was fuel for Daniel's darkest instincts. Together, they built a world of lies. They met in hotel suites paid with money Ava thought was going toward rent. They posed for pictures in restaurants, careful not to get caught but secretly thrilled by the risk. Zara showered Daniel with praise, telling him he was destined for greatness, that Ava was an anchor dragging him down. Why settle for her? Zara would purr, draping herself across his chest. She can't even buy you a decent suit. She's nothing but dead weight. With me, you'll have everything. Daniel believed her, or perhaps he needed to, because deep down he knew the truth. Without Ava's quiet sacrifices, without her constant support, he was nothing but a man pretending to be bigger than he was. But Zara wasn't satisfied with just being the other woman. She wanted more. She wanted the name, the ring, the title of wife, and she was willing to destroy Ava to get it. One night, in the warmth of their hotel room, Zara planted the seed of cruelty that would grow into the nightmare Ava endured. "She's pregnant," Daniel muttered, swirling a glass of whiskey. "It complicates things." Zara's eyes narrowed. "No, it doesn't. It's an opportunity." "What do you mean?" "She's vulnerable now, weak. If you leave her now, everyone will see you as a monster. But if something happens to her..." She let the words hang, sharp as broken glass. Daniel stared at her, his jaw tightening. He didn't say no, and that silence was permission enough. From that night forward, their whispers grew darker. They didn't just talk about leaving Ava. They talked about erasing her, making her disappear, turning her into a tragic headline no one would question. Zara was clever in her cruelty. She suggested ways to torment Ava before cutting her out completely. Mock her clothes, laugh at her pregnancy cravings, insist she was lazy, worthless, unlovable. Every word was a dagger meant to push Ava closer to despair. Daniel played along, sometimes even enjoying it. The more he hurt Ava, the more control he felt. He convinced himself it was her fault for being too soft, too trusting. He told himself Zara was his future, his ticket into the glittering world he craved. But cruelty, once started, never stops where you plan. The boiling water was Zara's idea. She called it a lesson. She wanted Ava scarred, broken, so Daniel would never look at her again. Daniel didn't have the stomach to plan it, but when the kettle hissed and Ava begged for mercy, he stood still. And his stillness was the deepest betrayal of all. What neither of them realized that night was that Ava's survival would be the very thing that doomed them. Because while they laughed over champagne, convinced they had finally silenced her, Ava was being lifted from the floor by hands that did not belong to either of them. She was carried to safety, treated, and given a chance to rise again. Daniel and Zara, meanwhile, spun their future together like silk. They began planning trips abroad, whispering about buying a loft downtown, dreaming of merging their names into power. Daniel even began introducing Zara to colleagues as his partner, though never in front of Ava. But arrogance makes blind men. They didn't notice the way colleagues whispered behind their backs, the way investors frowned at Daniel's recklessness, the way Zara's smugness grated even on those who had once admired her beauty. They were too wrapped up in themselves to see that their empire was built on lies. Daniel thought he had won. He thought Ava was finished. Zara thought she was untouchable. They didn't know that Ava's blood carried a dynasty stronger than either of them could imagine. And they certainly didn't know that Ethan Blackwell, the man Daniel once dismissed as untouchable, had already begun watching. Ethan had power Daniel could only dream of. He had resources that made Zara's beauty look like dust, and he had one reason to use them: Ava. The day Ethan chose to reveal himself would be the day Daniel and Zara's perfect little world went up in flames. The hospital walls still smelled of antiseptic when Ava stepped out into the world again. Her burns were bandaged, her body ached, but it was her spirit that felt heavier than ever. She had thought that maybe, just maybe, Daniel would visit, that he would show an ounce of remorse, or at the very least, a trace of guilt. But the days passed in silence. His phone remained cold, his name absent from the visitor's log. When she returned to the apartment, she found the locks changed. Daniel hadn't even left her clothes. Everything she owned, her dresses, her books, even the crib she had prepared, was gone. The neighbors averted their eyes, pretending not to hear her muffled sobs in the hallway. But the betrayal wasn't over. It was only beginning. A week later, Ava forced herself to attend the annual charity gala hosted by Sterling Motors, the company where Daniel worked. She didn't want to go, but a part of her clung to dignity. She wanted to remind him and the world that she was still his wife, that she wasn't invisible. The gala was everything her life was not. Glittering chandeliers, champagne glasses clinking, violins filling the air with music. Powerful men in tuxedos, women in gowns worth more than the entire rent of her building. Ava wore the only dress she had left, an old, pale blue one her mother had bought for her years ago. It was simple, a little faded, but she wore it with trembling pride. She entered quietly, clutching her small clutch purse. Heads turned, but not with admiration. Whispers hissed like snakes through the room. "Isn't that Daniel's wife? She looks so tired. Why would she come here dressed like that?" Ava ignored them, her eyes scanning the room for her husband. She found him near the stage, his arm wrapped around Zara. Zara was radiant in a crimson gown, dripping with diamonds Ava knew Daniel couldn't afford. Her hair shimmered under the lights, her laughter ringing out like a cruel bell. Daniel looked proud, smug, introducing her to executives, to investors, to anyone who would listen. Not once did he glance toward Ava. Ava's stomach twisted. She wanted to scream, to demand why he had abandoned her, why he had tried to destroy her. But she couldn't. She stood frozen, gripping her purse so tightly her knuckles whitened. Then the moment came. The moment that would etch itself into her memory forever. On stage, the host announced Daniel as one of the evening's special guests. Daniel strutted forward, Zara clinging to his side. He took the microphone, his voice booming with false charm. "Thank you everyone for supporting our cause tonight. This is not only a night for charity, it's a night for love, for partnership, for building a future together. And I would like to introduce you all to the woman who stands beside me." Gasps rippled through the room. Ava's heart stopped. "This is Zara Flynn," Daniel declared, pulling her close. "The woman I intend to spend the rest of my life with." Applause thundered. Cameras flashed. Zara leaned in and kissed him, long and triumphant, as if sealing her victory in front of everyone. Ava's breath caught. Her chest burned with humiliation, sharper than any flame Zara had poured on her. She was still his wife, still carrying his child. And yet here he was, erasing her existence in front of hundreds of people. She wanted to run, but her legs felt rooted to the marble floor. The whispers grew louder. "Isn't he still married? Poor woman. She should leave quietly. She doesn't belong here." Tears stung her eyes. She turned to leave, stumbling toward the exit. But halfway across the ballroom, her body betrayed her. The stress, the pain, the baby inside her, All of it collided in one terrifying moment. Ava collapsed. Gasps echoed. Champagne glasses clattered. Someone shouted, "She's pregnant," as Ava crumpled to the floor, clutching her belly. For the first time that evening, Daniel froze. Zara's smile faltered, but they didn't move to help. They stayed by the stage, frozen in their arrogance, as waiters and strangers rushed to Ava's side. Her vision blurred, voices muffled. She felt hands lifting her, a coat thrown over her shoulders, someone shouting for an ambulance. And in those last moments of consciousness, she thought she saw him. A tall man standing in the shadows at the edge of the ballroom, his eyes locked on hers, burning with a promise. She knew that face. She remembered her mother's voice whispering his name years ago. Ethan Blackwell. Her world went dark. But when Ava opened her eyes again, she would no longer be just a humiliated wife. She would be a woman on the path to reclaiming everything. And the villains who thought they had won would soon learn what it meant to challenge a billionaire heiress. The ambulance siren screamed against the night, but Ava could barely hear it. Her world was muffled, fading in and out, her breath shallow as tears streamed down her cheeks. She pressed her trembling hand against her belly, whispering prayers no one else could hear. "Please, little one, please hold on." She drifted in and out of consciousness until the fluorescent lights of the emergency room blinded her. Doctors rushed around, nurses barked orders, machines beeped. Ava was placed on a gurney, her pale face slick with sweat. She clutched desperately at one nurse's wrist. "My baby," she gasped. "We're doing everything we can," the nurse said firmly before pushing her into surgery. Hours blurred. Ava floated in darkness, trapped between fear and exhaustion. When she finally woke, it was in a quiet hospital room. The white walls hummed with silence. The monitor beside her beeped steadily. Her hand flew instantly to her stomach. A nurse appeared, her expression gentle. "The baby's heartbeat is strong," she said softly. "You were very lucky. Stress like this, it could have gone much worse. But for now, you and the child are safe." Relief crashed over Ava, but so did grief. Because safety didn't change the fact that her husband had abandoned her, that he had let another woman pour boiling water over her, that he had stood on a stage and announced his love for that same woman while Ava collapsed at his feet. The tears wouldn't stop. She turned her face into the pillow, sobbing until her chest hurt. She thought of her mother, of the promises she had made to live a normal life, to love simply, to find happiness outside of wealth. All of it felt like ashes now. She had believed in Daniel. She had sacrificed, trusted, forgiven, and this was the reward. Humiliation, betrayal, pain. The days in the hospital were endless. Ava lay in bed, bandages covering her burns, IV tubes dripping fluids into her veins. She stared at the ceiling for hours, unable to move, unwilling to speak. Visitors never came. Daniel didn't call. Zara didn't send a word. Even the neighbors who had once nodded politely at her door were silent. The loneliness was suffocating. Sometimes in the dead of night, Ava whispered to her unborn child, "It's just us now. I'll protect you, even if no one protects me." But the words felt hollow, because inside she wondered how she would survive. She had no home, no husband, no income. She couldn't even walk without pain. One afternoon she forced herself out of bed, limping to the mirror. What she saw nearly broke her. Her reflection was pale and thin. Her skin was marred with angry red patches from the burns. Her eyes were swollen from crying, her lips cracked. The vibrant young woman who once believed in fairy tales was gone. In her place stood someone she barely recognized, a ghost of herself. Her knees buckled. She sank to the bathroom floor, clutching her stomach as sobs shook her body. "Why me?" she whispered. "Why did he hate me so much? Why wasn't I enough?" It was the lowest moment of her life. But life has a way of breaking you down before it shows you the strength you didn't know you had. On the third night, a storm rattled against the hospital windows. Ava sat in silence, staring at the rain streaking down the glass. The baby kicked softly inside her, a fragile reminder that she wasn't completely alone. That tiny heartbeat gave her a reason to keep breathing. And then, as thunder roared, the door opened. A tall man stepped inside. His presence filled the room instantly, calm, powerful, unshakable. His suit was dark, tailored to perfection. His eyes, gray as steel, locked onto Ava with a mixture of concern and determination. "Who are you?" Ava whispered, her voice hoarse. The man moved closer, pulling a chair beside her bed. My name is Ethan Blackwell. The name hit her like lightning. She remembered her mother whispering it years ago. Ethan Blackwell, the elusive billionaire, her father's former business partner, the man who had disappeared from public life but never from the circles of power. I promised your mother I'd look after you, he said quietly. I stayed away to respect your choice for a simple life. But now, I can't stay silent. Ava's breath caught. She felt both relief and fear. Relief that someone finally cared, fear because his presence meant her life would never be the same. I know everything, Ava, Ethan continued, about your inheritance, about who you really are. Daniel doesn't deserve you. Zara doesn't scare me, and you, he leaned forward, his voice low and steady. You are stronger than you realize, but you can't keep hiding. It's time to rise. Ava shook her head, tears streaming down. I can't. I'm broken. I have nothing left. Ethan's eyes burned with conviction. You have everything. They tried to destroy you, but they only lit the fire inside you. And when you decide to fight, Daniel and Zara won't know what hit them. Ava stared at him, her heart pounding. Could she really rise from this? Could she face the people who had tried to erase her? The storm outside roared louder, rattling the windows as if answering her question. And in that moment, Ava realized she stood at a crossroads. Remain the broken woman Daniel left behind, or become the heiress her enemies would learn to fear. The storm outside had faded by morning, but inside Ava's heart, a different storm brewed. Ethan's words echoed through her mind. You are stronger than you realize. You are not just a victim. You are an heiress. For days, Ethan visited her quietly at the hospital. He never pushed, never demanded, but every time he sat by her bed, he reminded her of truths she had long buried. Her mother had trusted him. Her inheritance was not just a pile of money locked away. It was control of Mackenzie Holdings, a conglomerate stretching across continents. Ava had walked away from it years ago, too eager to live a simple life. But now that Daniel had humiliated her, now that Zara had nearly destroyed her, the empire wasn't just wealth, it was a weapon. At first, Ava resisted. I don't want power, she whispered one night, staring at her bandaged arms. I only wanted love. Ethan's voice was steady. Love doesn't destroy you, Ava. Power doesn't have to either, but without it, they will keep winning. And your child deserves better than to be raised in fear. Those words pierced her deeper than any wound. For the first time since Daniel's betrayal, she looked at her reflection in the hospital mirror and didn't see just a broken woman. She saw a mother, a protector, a woman who had something worth fighting for. 2 weeks later, Ava walked out of the hospital, her burns healing, her spirit still fragile but steadier than before. Ethan was waiting with a car, sleek, black, understated, but unmistakably powerful. The kind of car that made people stop and stare. Where are we going? Ava asked nervously, sliding into the leather seat. To reclaim what's yours, Ethan said simply. They drove downtown, past glittering skyscrapers and bustling streets, until they stopped in front of the Mackenzie Tower. The building rose 50 stories into the sky, its glass facade reflecting the morning sun. Ava froze, her chest tightening. She had seen it only once as a child, when her father had taken her to the top floor to watch the city below. Back then, she hadn't understood what it meant to own something so immense. Now she did. This is mine? She whispered. It always has been, Ethan replied. Inside, the lobby buzzed with executives, assistants, and clients. Men in suits strode across marble floors. Women in heels clicked past with files tucked under their arms. At the sight of Ethan, whispers spread like wildfire. But when Ava stepped beside him, heads turned, eyes widened. Ethan led her to a private elevator. On the top floor, the board of directors waited. Ava trembled as the doors opened. Gentlemen, ladies, Ethan said firmly, allow me to reintroduce Ava Mackenzie Sterling, the rightful heiress to this company. Gasps filled the room. The chairman, an older man with silver hair, nearly dropped his pen. Margaret's daughter? Alive? We thought she chose to live quietly, Ethan interrupted. But she's back now, and the company will need her. Ava's voice shook, but she forced herself to speak. I know I've been gone. I know I don't look like what you expect. But I'm not here to be ornamental. I'm here because people tried to destroy me, and they will not succeed. The board sat in stunned silence. For the first time, Ava felt the weight of her name, not as a burden but as armor. She was no longer invisible. She was a Mackenzie. Meanwhile, Across town, Daniel and Zara lounged in their new condo, celebrating what they thought was their victory. Zara scrolled through her phone, laughing at the photos from the gala. "Look at her," she sneered. "Crumpled on the floor like a beggar. The whole city knows she's pathetic now." Daniel smirked, sipping champagne. "She's done. No money, no home, no friends. By the time the baby comes, she'll be nothing but a sad little memory." But his phone buzzed. A headline flashed across the screen. Heiress Ava Mackenzie Sterling returns, takes control of Mackenzie Holdings. Daniel's glass slipped from his hand, shattering across the floor. "What the hell is this?" Zara snatched the phone, her eyes narrowing. "Heiress? Ava? That's impossible." The article was clear. Ava wasn't just his abandoned wife. She was the heir to billions. She had taken her seat at the head of the empire. Photos of her at the boardroom table filled the page, Ethan Blackwell standing at her side like a sentinel. Daniel's face drained of color. "She lied to me. All this time she was rich?" Zara's fury boiled over. "No, she can't win. She can't come back like this. We ended her. We made her nothing." But Ava wasn't nothing anymore. She was everything they feared. In that moment, Zara realized the truth. The scars they gave Ava would not weaken her. They had forged her into something unbreakable. And if Ava was stepping into her power, then both Zara and Daniel were standing on a cliff edge. Across the city, Ava sat in Ethan's office, staring out at the skyline. For the first time in months, her shoulders felt lighter. Her pain wasn't gone, but it had transformed into something sharper: resolve. She turned to Ethan. "They wanted me erased. Now I'll make sure the world sees exactly who they are." Ethan's eyes gleamed. "Then we start preparing. Because once you step onto this battlefield, there's no turning back." And as Daniel stormed out of his condo, determined to confront Ava, he didn't realize she was already 3 moves ahead, ready to expose him in front of the entire city. For weeks, Ava had been living in silence, drowning in the humiliation Daniel and Zara had poured over her. But now, after stepping back into Mackenzie Holdings with Ethan by her side, something inside her had shifted. It wasn't just anger anymore. It was purpose. She could no longer be the quiet wife who hid behind modest dresses and whispered dreams. If she was going to protect her child and claim what was rightfully hers, she needed to become someone else, someone stronger, bolder, impossible to ignore. Ethan understood this. "The world doesn't respect weakness, Ava," he told her one morning as they stood in his private penthouse overlooking the Chicago skyline. "They tried to humiliate you publicly. If you want to take them down, you need to show the world you are untouchable." Ava swallowed hard, staring at her reflection in the tall glass window. She still saw the scars from the burns. She still saw the fatigue in her eyes. But beneath that, she saw something new, a fire that refused to die. "Then teach me," she whispered, and Ethan did. The transformation didn't happen overnight. It began with small steps. Walking into rooms with her head held higher, speaking her name without hesitation, daring to look people in the eye instead of staring at the ground. But soon, the changes grew larger. Ethan introduced her to stylists, advisors, and mentors. They didn't dress her up as someone else. They helped her rediscover the woman she had always been, the heiress, the leader. Gone were the faded dresses and worn-out shoes. Ava now stood in tailored gowns that draped gracefully over her growing belly. Elegant but powerful, jewel tones that made her eyes blaze, fabrics that whispered wealth without screaming arrogance. Her scars were no longer something she hid. They became part of her story, softened by skillful makeup but never erased. The first time she stepped into a gala again, heads turned, not in pity but in awe. She wasn't the broken wife crumpled on the floor anymore. She was the heiress returned, a woman who had survived hell and walked out radiant. But the makeover was more than clothes. Ethan drilled her in boardroom strategy. "Know your numbers better than they do," he told her. "Walk into every meeting as if you've already won, and never ever let them see you doubt yourself." Ava listened. She studied the financial reports, memorized details about the company, asked sharp questions. The same woman who once spent nights sewing baby blankets now spent nights highlighting contracts, preparing speeches, and rehearsing negotiations. At first, the board underestimated her. They thought she would be ornamental, a quiet heiress letting Ethan make decisions. But in her first official meeting, Ava shattered that illusion. When an executive dismissed her concerns about a risky investment, Ava leaned forward, her voice steady. You think because I was gone, I don't understand how this company works. But I've read every report since its founding. I know the numbers better than you do. And I will not let this empire fall into the same greed that destroyed my marriage. The room fell silent. The executive lowered his eyes. From that moment on, no one doubted her again. Yet, even as she grew stronger, Ava's heart still carried wounds. At night, she would rest her hand on her belly, whispering to her unborn child, I'm doing this for you. You'll never grow up thinking your mother was weak. You'll know I fought for us. But Daniel and Zara weren't finished. Word of Ava's transformation spread quickly. Socialites whispered about her stunning reappearance. Tabloids splashed her photo across front pages. Heiress returns from ashes. Mackenzie dynasty revived. Daniel seethed every time he saw her face. Zara raged at every article praising Ava's resilience. One evening, Daniel slammed his fist on the table. She's making me look like a fool. You did that yourself, Zara snapped, though she quickly softened her tone. We just need to get ahead of her. She can't erase the fact that you're still her husband. Daniel's eyes narrowed. Then maybe it's time I remind her of that. Meanwhile, Ava was preparing her next move. She wasn't content with surviving. She wanted justice. She wanted to expose Daniel and Zara, not just as adulterers, but as abusers, manipulators, parasites who fed off her silence. Ethan warned her. Once you start this, Ava, there's no turning back. They will fight dirty. They will try to break you again. Ava met his gaze, her eyes fierce. They already tried, and I'm still standing. The first step was reclaiming her public image. She granted an interview, not to a flashy gossip magazine, but to a respected business journal. Dressed in emerald green, her posture regal, she spoke of resilience, of motherhood, of the importance of integrity in business and in life. But beneath her calm words was a message directed at Daniel and Zara. I am not your victim anymore. The article went viral. Women across the city praised her courage. Investors who had doubted her lined up to support her. Overnight, Ava Sterling became more than an heiress. She became a symbol. Daniel couldn't stand it. Zara couldn't stomach it. And together they plotted their counterattack. But Ava wasn't naive anymore. She knew they would strike back. And this time, she was ready. Late one night, as she sat in Ethan's penthouse reviewing documents, he placed a hand on the folder and looked at her intently. You've come so far, Ava, he said. But now comes the hardest part. You've shown the world who you are. The next step is showing Daniel and Zara who you've become. Ava inhaled slowly, her hand resting on her belly. Then let them come. Because I won't just defend myself, I'll end them. And as fate would have it, her chance would arrive sooner than expected. At a public board event where Daniel and Zara planned their grandest move yet. The night of the Mackenzie Holdings annual shareholders gala arrived with a weight that Ava could feel in her bones. It was not just another evening of champagne and speeches. It was the stage where she would decide her destiny. For months, she had prepared, endured, and transformed. Tonight, she would stop being a victim and become the storm Daniel and Zara never saw coming. The ballroom glittered with chandeliers, the air thick with perfume and ambition. Executives, investors, and reporters filled the space, their conversations a low hum of money and power. At the center of it all stood Ava, dressed in a flowing black gown that shimmered under the lights. Her posture was regal, her scars softened but visible, reminders of what she had survived. At her side stood Ethan Blackwell, calm and commanding, a silent force that made even the boldest men lower their voices. Daniel and Zara entered late, as if they wanted all eyes on them. Daniel wore a sharp tuxedo, his arrogance practically dripping from his smirk. Zara was in a gold gown, her arm hooked tightly around his. They strutted into the room like a royal couple, certain that the night belonged to them. But Ava was waiting. The speeches began, one after another, until it was Ava's turn. She walked onto the stage, the sound of her heels echoing through the hall. The crowd quieted, curiosity sparking in their eyes. Many of them remembered her collapse at the last gala. Tonight she looked like an entirely different woman. Good evening, Ava began, her voice steady, clear. For those who don't know me, my name is Ava Mackenzie Sterling. I stand before you not only as the heiress of Mackenzie Holdings, but as a woman who has endured betrayal, humiliation, and violence. And I am here tonight to tell the truth. A ripple went through the room. Daniel's smug smile faltered. Zara's grip on his arm tightened. Ava paused, scanning the crowd. Then she raised her hand. Screens around the ballroom flickered to life. The first video played. Security footage from her old apartment building. Daniel shoving her in the hallway, shouting at her. Zara standing behind him, laughing. Gasps filled the room. The second video appeared. A neighbor's phone recording from the night of the boiling water. The screams, the kettle tipping, Ava collapsing. The audience erupted in shock, horrified murmurs sweeping across the room. Daniel's face turned ashen. Zara's lips parted in panic. But Ava wasn't done. On the screen appeared bank statements, messages, proof of Daniel siphoning money from accounts Ava had unknowingly supported, spending it on Zara, designer clothes, hotel rooms, luxury trips, every detail exposed like a wound. "You all know my husband, Daniel Sterling," Ava said, her voice rising with controlled fury. "You've seen him at galas, dinners, shaking hands, smiling for cameras. But what you haven't seen is the truth. The man who tried to destroy his pregnant wife, who stood by while his mistress poured boiling water over me, who thought he could erase me and replace me." The silence in the room was deafening. Investors whispered furiously, reporters scribbled, cameras flashed. Daniel stepped forward, his voice shaking. "This is a lie. She's making this up." But Ava raised her hand again, cutting him off. The final recording filled the screens. It was an audio file. Daniel's voice drunken, slurred. "She's nothing. Weak. When she's gone, no one will even care. Zara's the only future I want." Zara's laughter followed. "Then let's make it happen." The crowd erupted. Shouts, gasps, fury. Reporters bolted for the doors to break the story. Investors turned their backs. Daniel's face twisted in rage, but he was powerless. Zara's hand slipped from his arm, her mask of confidence shattering. Ava stood tall, her voice steady. "You tried to bury me, but you forgot. I am not weak. I am not invisible. And I will never be silenced again." The applause that followed was thunderous. Not polite claps, but roaring, defiant applause that shook the chandeliers. Ava's chest tightened with emotion, tears threatening to fall. She had done it. She had exposed them. But even as she stood victorious, Daniel's eyes burned with hatred. He shoved through the crowd, pointing a finger at her. "This isn't over, Ava. You think you've won, but you don't know what I'm capable of." Zara backed away, realizing too late that her golden future was turning to dust. The crowd's jeers followed her, their judgment sharp and merciless. Ava stepped down from the stage, Ethan steadying her arm. Her heart pounded, adrenaline surging, but beneath it all was peace. She had faced them. She had spoken. And she had won, or so she thought. As she walked out of the ballroom, flashes of cameras surrounding her, Ethan leaned close. His voice was low, serious. "You've exposed them, Ava. But men like Daniel, they don't surrender. They retaliate." Ava tightened her grip on his arm. "Then let him try, because now I'm ready." And just as she said the words, her phone buzzed with a message that froze her blood. A threat against her unborn child, signed only with Daniel's initials. The text glowed on Ava's phone screen like poison. "You won't win. The baby won't save you, DS." Her blood turned cold, but instead of collapsing into fear, Ava felt something new surge through her veins. Determination. Daniel wasn't just a cruel husband anymore. He was a threat to her child, and that she would never forgive. Ethan read the message over her shoulder, his jaw tightening. "He's desperate," he said grimly. "That makes him dangerous, but it also means he's about to destroy himself." Ava nodded, her hand instinctively covering her belly. "Then let's finish this, tonight." The next morning, the city woke up to headlines of scandal. News outlets replayed the footage Ava had shown at the gala, dissecting every frame. Talk shows debated Daniel's downfall, panelists condemning Zara's cruelty. Social media exploded with hashtags, "Justice for Ava, strengthen scars, no more silence." But behind the noise, Daniel was unraveling. In his condo, he smashed bottles against the wall, pacing like a trapped animal. Zara sat in the corner, mascara smeared, her gold gown from the gala wrinkled and stained. "You said she was nothing," she hissed. "You promised me she'd disappear. Now the whole city knows we tried to kill her." Daniel spun on her, his eyes wild. "Shut up. If you hadn't pushed me," she cut him off with a bitter laugh. "Don't you dare blame me. You poured your soul into me because you thought she was weak. And now, she's stronger than both of us combined." The words hit him like knives. For the first time, Daniel saw what he had created. not a partner in Zara, but a mirror reflecting his own emptiness. Still, his pride wouldn't let him admit defeat. "She won't keep my name," he growled. "She won't keep my child. I'll take them both down before that happens." What Daniel didn't know was that Ava was already 10 steps ahead. With Ethan's help, she had gathered evidence, not just of Daniel's abuse, but of his financial crimes. Embezzlement, fraud, tax evasion, years of greed laid bare in ledgers and emails. That morning, Ethan's legal team filed everything with federal investigators. By afternoon, the police arrived at Daniel's condo. Cameras followed as he was dragged out in handcuffs, his hair disheveled, his eyes burning with rage. Zara screamed, clinging to him, but officers pulled her back. Reporters shouted questions, microphones shoved forward. "Ava Sterling has accused you of attempted murder. Do you have anything to say?" "Daniel, did you siphon company funds for personal use? Do you regret humiliating your wife at the gala?" Daniel spat curses, but the image was already sealed. The once confident husband was now a disgraced criminal, his empire turned to dust. Zara, left behind, tried to salvage herself. She rushed to news outlets claiming innocence, insisting she was just a bystander. But the recordings proved otherwise. Her laughter during Ava's torture played on every television screen in Chicago. Her face became the symbol of cruelty. Within days, sponsors dropped her, friends abandoned her, and the glamorous life she clung to crumbled into ashes. For Ava, watching their downfall wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about justice. She stood in front of cameras, her hand resting protectively on her belly, and spoke words that resonated far beyond the boardroom. "I was told I was weak. I was told I was nothing. But weakness is not in scars, or in silence, or in suffering. Weakness is in cruelty, in betrayal, in those who try to break others to feel powerful. I am not broken. I am still standing, and I will raise my child in a world where women know they do not have to suffer in silence." The applause was deafening. Across the city, people wept. Messages poured in from women who had endured abuse, thanking Ava for speaking when they could not. She had become more than an heiress. She had become a voice. Weeks later, the trial began. Ava sat in the courtroom, Ethan by her side, as prosecutors laid out the evidence. Daniel glared at her from across the aisle, his eyes filled with venom, but Ava did not flinch. When asked to testify, she stood tall, recounting the night of the boiling water, the humiliation at the gala, the threats. Her voice never wavered. The jury deliberated for only 3 hours before returning with the verdict: guilty on all charges, attempted murder, fraud, abuse. Daniel Sterling was sentenced to decades behind bars. Zara, though spared prison, faced civil suits that bankrupted her. Her name became synonymous with betrayal, her beauty wasted on tabloids that no longer admired her but pitied her. She disappeared into obscurity, forgotten by the very society she once craved. And Ava? She flourished. With Ethan's mentorship, she took full control of Mackenzie Holdings, guiding it into a new era. But unlike her father, she didn't rule with cold ambition. She ruled with empathy, creating initiatives for women in business, funding shelters for survivors of abuse, using her power to protect instead of destroy. Her child was born healthy, a little girl with eyes as fierce as her mother's. Ava named her Margaret, after the woman who had sacrificed everything to give her a chance at a normal life. On the day she left the hospital with her newborn in her arms, Ethan walked beside her, carrying the diaper bag. The cameras flashed, reporters shouting questions, but Ava only smiled. "This is the beginning," she told them. "Not just for me, but for every woman who has ever been told she is powerless. We are never powerless. We only need to remember who we are." Ethan glanced at her, pride softening his usually cold features. "Your mother would be proud," he whispered. Ava looked down at her daughter, tears filling her eyes. For the first time in years, they weren't tears of pain. They were tears of healing. The city buzzed with the news of her triumph. But in Ava's heart, the real victory was quieter. It was the sound of her baby's breath against her chest, the warmth of a future free from fear, the peace of knowing she had survived the worst and built something better. Her story had begun in betrayal and fire, but it ended in strength and love. And as the sun rose over Chicago, Ava whispered to her daughter, "They tried to destroy us, but we turned their cruelty into power, and we will never be silent again." So that's it, my wonderful friends. Our story has come to an end, And if you're still here with me right now, it must mean something in this journey touched your heart in a way that words alone can't explain. Ava's pain, her strength, and her transformation remind us that even in our darkest hours, we are never truly powerless. Life will break us, humiliate us, and sometimes, like Ava, we'll feel abandoned when we need love the most. But as Marcus Aurelius once wrote, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. Ava's scars did not define her. They became proof of her resilience. And isn't that true for us as well? The wounds we carry, the betrayals we endure, they don't have to destroy us. They can shape us into something greater, if we let them. Perhaps you've faced your own Daniel and Zara, people who tried to diminish you, to make you believe you were small. But as the Stoic Epictetus said, no man is free who is not master of himself. True freedom is not found in wealth or in other people's approval, but in our ability to rise when life tries to bury us. Ava rose, not just for herself, but for her child. And you too can rise, for your dreams, for your family, for the life you deserve. Remember, pain can be a prison, but it can also be the fire that forges your strength. So if this story stirred something in you, I ask you, don't keep it to yourself. Like this video, share it with someone who needs courage today, and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss the next story that might just heal a part of you. Because here, in this space, we remind each other of something simple yet profound. No matter what happens, we are never truly broken, we are still standing.